Okay. Hi, guys. I know we're still having a few people join us, so I'm just going to give it a few minutes before I introduce our presenter that we have today. So thank you again for joining, and we're going to get started in a few minutes. Okay, so my name is Rachel. I am one of the admissions counselors here at Stony Brook University. Both myself and we have a few other people from admissions here in the chat to assist you guys with any questions you may have. We do ask that you submit any of your questions into the Q&A function. You won't have access to the chat feature. So anything that comes up during the presentation, just make sure that you are putting it in the Q&A section, and we will get to it. We will have a live Q&A at the end of the session. But right now, I would like to introduce our presenter tonight, Dr. Schleider. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology here at Stony Brook University, and I am going to let her take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm so excited to be speaking with all of you this evening. I hope you're getting a chance to rest after a work day or after a school day. But I'm delighted to be sharing with you a little bit about our research lab here at Stony Brook University in the psychology department, the Lab for Scalable Mental Health, and sharing a little bit about what we do, what we find, and also opportunities for Stony Brook students, including undergraduates, very much undergraduates, to get involved in our work. Before I start, some housekeeping. I have to acknowledge and thank the various sources of research funding that go into the work that we do, from the National Institute of Health, the American Psychological Foundation, the National Science Foundation, and others that all make of our work and training opportunities for students possible. All right, so before I dive in, I just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction to myself in a more detailed way. I went to college at a small liberal arts school, Swarthmore, in Pennsylvania, although I grew up in New York City. So I'm local. I'm happy to be back in New York. After I went to Swarthmore, I got my PhD in clinical psychology at Harvard University, and I did my clinical training residency year at Yale School of Medicine to learn more about treating kids and teens with significant mental health problems. I served as a consultant for the World Bank, helping them design and disseminate school-based interventions and treatment programs for preventing depression in teenagers in Argentina. And now I'm here at Stony Brook, and I'm really happy to be in the clinical psychology area in the psych department. And I just want to say a little bit of why I'm doing what I'm doing, which I think will become clearer as I go through the presentation. But before I went to college, I took some time to work for a nonprofit called Breakthrough New York. And while I was there, I actually taught middle school math and drama. And I absolutely loved it. Thought for a second there I was going to be a middle school teacher. But the more I worked there, the more I realized and observed that a lot of the problems that my students were experiencing, the challenges that were really most important to them and getting in the way, had very little to do with algebra, what I was teaching them in the classroom, and very much to do with their lives, the challenges they were experiencing with friends, at home, within themselves, feelings of fear about the future, hopelessness about what would happen for them, depression, anxiety. And I really wanted to be able to do something other than teach them algebra to help them through those really significant challenges. And so when I got to college and beyond, I learned about scientific research, got a ton of experience as an undergrad, and was able to pursue a research career in psychology. So that's how I got interested in this area. And I'm really happy to be doing this work now. So quick agenda, what I'm going to be talking to you about. I want to share a little bit with you about what our lab's mission is, why we're working on the problems that we think are important. I want to share a little bit of what our interventions look like. I'm actually going to be focusing on our digital supports today to walk you through one of our online programs to support depression in teenagers. And then I want to preview opportunities for all of you to contribute to some of the work that we do at Stony Brook. Our undergraduate research assistants are major parts of our operation, as you'll see. And I'm more than happy to talk in more detail about any questions you have about contributions at the undergrad level. All right, so a little bit of background. There has been a whole lot of progress that scientists have made over the past 50, 60 years in identifying effective ways to treat and prevent mental health problems in youth, such as depression, anxiety. These things are very common and they are treatable. Unfortunately, we have a very long way to go in making sure that those treatments actually reach all of the youth and families that actually need them. So of the kids in the United States, based on data, government level data from national sources, about 20% of teens with mental health difficulties end up getting the treatment they need for their mental health problems, accessing it at all, only 20%. And of that 20%, about 1 in 5 will receive what we psychologists, experts in the field, consider to be a full course of treatment. So on average, mental health interventions, treatment programs are designed to be about 16 sessions, 1 hour weekly meetings, 16 times, 4 months or so. But we know from national insurance reimbursement data that on average, teenagers attend between 3 and 4 sessions before ending treatment for some reason or another. And the most common number of sessions that teenagers attend for mental health difficulties after accessing care is actually just 1. So something's really not quite right with our method for getting these treatments to the people who need them, right? Why is that? Well, one reason is there aren't enough therapists. We simply don't have enough providers to give the care to everybody who needs care. But it's actually so extreme that provider shortages are way too severe to actually fix the need to access gap just through expanding our workforce. So adding more therapists, even if we were to double the number of providers in the country tomorrow, would not solve the mental health crisis in the United States. The areas in blue on this map, which I generated a few months ago, reflect formally designated mental health care provider shortage areas in the United States. And you can see that almost the entire country is blue. That's because almost the entire country is in fact a designated mental health care provider shortage area. So that's going to be a difficult hill to climb if we're relying on workforce expansion to meet the youth mental health needs in the US. Even beyond that problem of there aren't enough therapists, it's also true that not all of our treatments work all of the time. So the sort of gold standard treatment, outpatient treatment for youth depression and anxiety involves cognitive behavioral therapy, weekly sessions with a therapist. But these graphs actually show what are called effect sizes, the magnitude of how well the intervention works on average from 1970 or 1980 to the present day. You can actually see that this line for how effective anxiety treatments have been over time, this is time, this is how effective. Bigger effect sizes mean the intervention works better. It's going a little bit up, but that's actually not a significant difference in how well we've been treating anxiety since 1970. And for depression, you can see that the effect sizes over time have actually been declining for how well our treatments work. And that is a significant change over time. As in, we've gotten worse at treating depression in teenagers from 1980 to the present day. So that's a little bit of a reality check for folks in the mental health field to really reconsider what we're doing and how we're building interventions and how we get them to people who need them. So there's a clear need, right, for accessible and well-targeted approaches that may not only strengthen the effects of the interventions and the treatment approaches that we already have that can work for some people, but also interventions and treatments that offer something, ideally something with scientific backing behind it, for those many, many kids across the country who are otherwise accessing nothing at all. And that's where we hope the Lab for Scalable Mental Health can fill in some of the gaps that have been stagnant in our mental health care ecosystem in the United States. And we have a few different goals that are all interrelated. We develop brief and scalable interventions for mental health problems in youth, focusing on teenagers, since the teenage years are times when mental health problems tend to onset and get much worse in development. And we focus specifically on depression and anxiety, which are two of the most common types of mental health difficulties in teenagers. Identify how those interventions work, and figure out ways to match people to brief supports that best fit their needs and areas where they need help. And finally, our third goal is to test new ways of dissemination, which is a fancy way of saying getting the treatments out there to the people who actually need them, making sure that the treatments live in the right places for people to access them at the actual moments when they want and need help, rather than going on a wait list for treatment that can last months, sometimes years, before actually seeing a provider. So an important question that drives our work is actually, can brief interventions really help? Previously, treatments for depression and anxiety have been designed to be very, very long, 16 sessions on average, like I mentioned previously. And that's a tall order when you realize that people are only getting on average 3 or 4 sessions with a provider. So we wanted to test a really extreme version of the question of whether brief interventions can work. So we decided to conduct what's called a meta-analysis, which is basically identifying all the studies that have been done on a topic and putting them together statistically to see on average what the field has to say about a scientific result. And we did a meta-analysis to try to see if one session of treatment for depression, anxiety, and other common problems could actually help, youth mental health difficulties. And as it turned out, we discovered that there were 50 different clinical trials that had tested whether one session of treatment could be helpful. And what we found was that they can be, actually. So on the y-axis here, the up and down axis, that's the effect size on average for one session treatments versus some kind of control or comparison group. And on the x-axis, you can see the number of studies that had been done for each different kind of mental health problem in teens, testing one session interventions. And you can see that overall, the mean effect size for one session interventions was small to medium, with these effect sizes emerging for specific problem types. But what I want to draw your attention to is this comparison right here. Anxiety disorders, conduct disorders, or behavioral problems, and depression are the most common types of mental health problems in children. And what shocked us when we were doing this study was the fact that these blue bars, which represent the effect sizes for one session treatments, right there, are not all that different in magnitude from those red bars, which are the average effect size for treatments that are on average 16 sessions. And when we looked at those effect sizes and we saw that you can actually do something meaningful in one session compared to 16 sessions, that was our cue to really consider how we can make the most out of that opportunity. If somebody only gets one session with a provider or one session with a program, like a digital program, how do we make the most of that moment? Because we know it's possible to do something, so we really want to optimize it. And that's basically what our lab tries to do. Figure out if somebody is only going to be able to access a really brief dose of support, what should that support look like to make sure that they benefit as much as possible in that interaction? So that begs the question, right? What should SSIs, or single session interventions, target? I'm going to be using SSI just because the term single session intervention is really, lots of syllables and really wordy, so I'm going to nickname it to SSI. But we take the approach of targeting within person mechanisms that can be modified, things within ourselves, attitudes, beliefs, ideas that can actually be changed or molded in a very short period of time. So that is either short-term outcomes like a sense of hope for the future, or behaviors that are helpful or unhelpful to psychopathology, or specific symptoms. For depression, for instance, is made up of many, many different possible symptoms. But if you target just one, like a sense of control over your day-to-day life, or how much you like yourself, or how kind to yourself you are, that can make a difference, and it's something you can accomplish in a short period of time. So our lab has actually developed, tested, and iterated a series of self-guided online programs that have been made with teens and for teens to help with different features of depression. And a few of them are publicly available for free. All of our interventions are available free of charge. But they all target something a little bit different. One targets the idea that people can change simply because of how our brains are built. So it teaches a lot of neuroscience. One teaches strategies for being kind to yourself, even when being mean to yourself seems like it's going to be more helpful to you. Probably being kind to yourself is probably going to be more helpful. Another teaches something called behavioral activation, which is a fancy way of saying engaging in activities that are important to you and that matter to you in an effort to boost your mood. So each of our programs target something a little different, and we test them in large-scale trials in teens across the country and across the globe to see if we can be helpful in reducing the global burden of depression. So I'm a relatively new faculty member at Stony Brook, and I've loved my time here so far. And I actually founded our lab in 2018, so just under between 2 and 3 years ago. And since that time, with the help of really amazing undergraduate research assistants and staff and graduate students, we've been able to launch and complete 13 different clinical trials, testing whether our single session interventions can be helpful when they're given online, in outpatient clinics, for instance, to people who are waiting to be seen by a therapist longer term, or in primary care clinics. Everybody has a medical checkup, so it seems very logical to embed mental health supports, especially brief ones, in the context of regular primary care. So we have grants to support all of these different kinds of studies and endeavors. More than 5,000 teenagers, young adults, and families have taken our interventions since 2018. We actually are our newest National Institutes of Health funded trial of our single session interventions. It was a randomized trial across the whole country. Teens in all 50 states participated, had 2,400 teens. And as of today, I can share that we found that our interventions did reduce depression during the pandemic in teenagers across the US. All of our interventions are free, and all of our data are public, because a really big principle of our lab is making science open and inclusive, and making sure that the kind of research and the findings that we produce from our work are accessible to the public, not just to other scientists. So how do we go about building a one-session intervention? What does that even look like? Well, we follow an evidence-based set of guidelines that we've developed based on our work and based on decades of social science research that we call the best elements of single-session interventions for youth mental health. And each of those stands for something different. The B in BEST stands for brain science. In all of our interventions, we use neuroscience principles that we teach to normalize the concepts that we're trying to relay, and to actually teach how and why the skills that we're teaching teenagers are rooted in neuroscience. They're not just things we think work, they're things that work because of how the brain functions. E is for empower. In all of our interventions, we don't just say to teenagers, we know what you should do to cope better. We actually ask them what they do to cope. We want to empower them because they have lived experience and knowledge that can be useful for others. And we want to make sure that we harness that and honor it by asking them, what would they do to help others with depression or anxiety cope more effectively based on what they learned in the intervention and based on their life experience. So we really aim to make youth who participate in our work take advantage of their amazing knowledge and experience and use it to help their peers. S is for saying is believing activities. Those are just writing exercises to help teens and any user remember and practice using the skills that they're learning in the program. And then we have a lot of personal narratives from teens that we've collected over the years, actual stories of how teenagers have used the skills that we teach in our interventions to cope in their real life, how these things have been helpful to them. These are just some slides that show what teenagers see when they go through our self-guided online programs. Our opening section essentially says, hey, we need your help. Not we know how to help you, we need your help. And we explain that we are scientists from Stony Brook University, and we study ways, people and how the brain works and how to help teens cope better with stress. But we really could use some help in explaining these neuroscience concepts to others in ways that will resonate and that will feel relevant to them. So we need the users' help to do that, to share these narratives and stories in ways that will make sense and feel real. Teens listen to a bunch of narratives from others describing how they've used the skill that is about to be taught in the intervention to help them cope with depression-related symptoms, anxiety-related symptoms in their real actual lives. We include lessons on neuroplasticity, how and why the brain is always capable of change, and that includes the ability to cope, the ability to regulate emotions and distress, to seek out help from others. And so depression, anxiety, these things are not character traits. They are experiences that are not set in stone. And people have more power than they realize simply because of how human physiology works to actually change those things. We use the metaphor of, scientists say it's like the connections in our brains are made with a pencil, not a permanent marker, which means it is technically always possible for us to build new connections and make new pathways and learn new skills and ways of dealing with stress. We describe scientific studies, again, underscoring the points that we're trying to make in the interventions. We use data from large samples of teenagers that we've collected before, showing that it's actually normal for situations and feelings and lives to change, even over the course of a school year. And then we have teens reflect on how they would feel if they were rejected by somebody who thought they was their friend. So they write a little bit about what they would feel, what they would think, and how they would react if somebody who was their friend the previous school year just kind of totally iced them out or ignored them the subsequent year. And then we ask for advice. What would you tell to somebody else based on what you just learned in this program about the fact that what's happening to you right now may not be forever, that things can actually maybe get better and change in the future? I just wanted to share a couple of responses that we've received. One participant said, I would tell them to remember that even though it feels like these things will never end, nothing is forever, maybe by being nice to the kid, you can make him realize that he's being mean and his neurons will help him change for the better. People got different brains. Everybody's brain is constantly growing and changing. That friend of yours probably just got some struggle going on in theirs and may just need time, but even if they don't come back to be your friend, they're not the only person who would care about you. So we've tested out this intervention, which is called Project Personality, which teaches the idea that because of how our brains are built, we're all capable of change. We've tested whether it can help with depression in teenagers from 12 to 15 years old. These are teenagers who were experiencing depression. We did find that actually this intervention compared to a control group reduced depression over 9 months across very diverse teens, regardless of race, ethnicity, whether they were receiving other treatments, family income, and other factors. In a separate study in North Carolina public schools, where this intervention was given to all high school girls, 10th graders in a couple of different schools, we found that girls who received Growing Minds, which was a version of the intervention that I just shared, their rates of clinical depression actually decreased from 38% to 29% over 4 months. And girls who got a control group program, their rates of depression actually increased from 37% to 40% over 4 months, which just shows you the potential buffering effect of this intervention and gave us ideas for different ways that we could embed it and disseminate it in different places. I want to shift a little bit to talk about some of our outreach efforts and how we've combined those with research. So about 1.5 years ago, Our lab's research on brief and scalable interventions got some media attention. So we were written about in The Atlantic and in Vox, and we started getting phone calls from parents and teenagers across the country. At the time, we were really only working out of Stony Brook, but across the country, asking if their families could try out our programs or treatments or interventions. And at the time, we weren't set up for that. We were not set up for national level scaling of our programs. But getting these phone calls kind of made us realize, well, our mission is to do that, so we should probably find a way to make it happen. So we did. And that's how Project Yes was born. Yes stands for Youth Empowerment and Support. It is an ongoing program evaluation that actually anybody listening right now can take part in if you want to, of our online single session interventions for adolescent mental health. And our goal is to test out the acceptability, how well are they viewed, how positively are they viewed, and the short-term usefulness of 3 of our free of charge open access online interventions for adolescent internalizing distress, which is a fancy technical way of saying depression and anxiety. In line with SSI design, each program that teens can choose from themselves is designed to target and strengthen an adaptive belief about the self and the world that's been linked to youth depression in the past. And this is the paper that I published with graduate students in my research lab who've really been instrumental in supporting this work, reporting the results of our study. How does Project Yes work? Well, participants first pick an activity. There are 3 different SSIs that teams can try, and any of them is fair game for people to use. You can see the link to our website for Project Yes there, and you're welcome to go take a look at it if you want. Step 2 is tell us what you think. So we have some before and after surveys that users can complete to tell us what they thought of the activity, how they're feeling before and after the activity, so that we can see whether it's helping people. And 3, we ask teens to share their advice. Share your best advice for other kids and teens who may be struggling with depression. And we actually have an advice center on the Project Yes website where teens' anonymous advice is posted if they give us permission for others to learn from. So here's an example. So somebody shared the advice, there's always a way out, always a solution, even if it might not seem so. Really, this is 100% true. I know a lot of teens who went through the worst pains. And if you reach a point where you know this is serious, get help, tell someone you trust, don't isolate yourself, it won't solve anything. Don't ever, under any circumstance, lose hope. And that was just from a teen who completed Project Yes because they wanted to, because they felt like it, they were interested. We post on Instagram, sharing this opportunity with people quite a bit. And we have dozens of advice like that on our website that we really love to look through. So does Project Yes work? Yeah, we find that it does. These are the interventions that we include. Project Personality, which teaches, that's the intervention I just shared with you. Project Care, which teaches self-compassion. And the ABC Project, Action Brings Change, which teaches behavioral activation, so engaging in valued activities to combat low mood. And just based on the first 200 or so teen completers, ages 11 to 17, from before to after taking part in Project Yes, teens' hopelessness that they reported showed a 62% chance of going down. Teens' perceived control over their own emotions and life circumstances had a 64% chance of going up, so getting better. And teens' self-reported self-hatred, which is a really common symptom of depression, actually showed a 55% chance of going down as well. And we also ask, just for our own information to get a better, bigger picture of how this is feeling for people, we ask every teen who does the program, compared to before you did this activity, how hopeless do you feel right now? Just basically. And about 75% said they felt either a little or a lot less hopeless after completing the program compared to before. And for a 20 to 30 minute online self-guided activity, we think that's pretty good. Based on these results, we're now partnering with the city of San Antonio, Texas. So the city department of Health actually contacted our lab for a collaboration. And as of next week, all of our interventions, 100% of them, are going to be available on the Yes website in Spanish and in English. And we're actually going to do a rollout of Project Yes to about 8,000 teenagers in the San Antonio, Texas area. To see if it can be helpful for those youth. We spent the last 6 months or so collecting personal narratives of recovery and coping from teenagers who've struggled with depression, who live in San Antonio, Texas, who are bilingual, Spanish English speakers. So we're really excited to launch this collaborative project in the next couple of weeks. So our team is big. In addition to me as the director, we have a postdoctoral fellow, that's another clinical psychologist in our lab, 4 PhD students, 4 post-baccalaureate lab coordinators who kind of oversee the comings and goings of all of our many clinical trials, who all have BAs. And 2 of them actually have bachelors from Stony Brook, so they stuck around after being an undergrad RA for a couple of years. And we have 20 research assistants. It's a competitive process to get admitted and selected as a research assistant to our lab. There's an interview involved, there's an application involved. This last round, we actually got about 75 applications for just 5 or 10 openings. But our RAs get wonderful training in a lot of different ways, and I'll describe them to you. This is a remote lab meeting that you're seeing, so that's why there are all the Zoom boxes there. Opportunities. Well, first of all, there are bi-monthly lab meetings where our undergrads receive workshops delivered by me and our grad students on how to write resumes and CVs, how to navigate the grad school process, how to get post-baccalaureate jobs in research or other fields. We also have journal clubs where we discuss an article of interest in the area that we study. Usually that's led by a PhD student, but we have had undergrads actually co-lead those discussions for those who've been in lab for a little bit longer. We have structured training opportunities in clinical research for lab coordinators. So we actually give our undergrad research assistants a really high level of responsibility in that our undergrads are doing clinical screening interviews with families who may take part in our research. So you're on the phone talking and interviewing in a semi-structured way, parents and their teenage kids to see if they fit criteria for their studies. More advanced undergraduate research assistants actually lead families via Zoom all over the country through our studies and our interventions, our online programs. RAs get training and in the assessment of risk for suicide and self-harm, which is a really, really important part of what we do to make sure every single participant is safe and looked out for in our research study. Of course, there are lots of supports in place for undergrads doing those kinds of risk assessments, and they're directly supervised by people with licenses to practice and provide mental health treatment. But it's a really wonderful training opportunity and a supportive and scaffolded environment for undergraduate students to get really great training in this area in preparation for grad school. We do require a 2-semester commitment at 9 hours a week at least. I will say most of our undergrad research assistants end up staying with us for multiple years, not just the 2 semesters, because they want to stay. You get a lab buddy. You're matched with a PhD student or a postdoctoral fellow who meets with you every single month to see how you're doing in lab and outside of lab as a human, to give you support and guidance on your career, to think through how things can be improved in terms of your lab experience. There are opportunities to work with PhD students under their supervision on additional research projects for students who want to get more research experience in clinical psychology. And we actually have some students who are undergraduates who have or are now conducting independent studies or honors theses with us. So 2 honors thesis students are currently in our lab, and they're co-advised by me and one of my PhD students. That's a 1.5-year commitment. It's a huge amount of responsibility and work, but it is a really wonderful experience for students who want to pursue it. And we're always open to working with talented and motivated students on those kinds of things. All right, I think that's all that I had for you for today. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Great, thank you, Dr. Schleider. It looks like we do have a few questions, so I will read some of them to you. So this one I feel like you kind of went into, but it is, could you please speak more to the role of undergraduate students / researchers in projects and trials such as this at Stony Brook? are the undergraduate students and researchers primarily psychology and or neuroscience majors?
That's a great question. So I think I did speak to the first part of the question in that, how are they involved? They're integral team members. As I mentioned, we have 20 of them because we need 20 research assistants at any given time in order for all of our clinical trials to work. So they are very heavily involved in every step of that process. In terms of whether most of them are psych majors, often they are, simply because those are the folks who are interested and apply to work in our lab. But not all by any stretch. So of the undergrads who are in our lab right now, many are pre-med, so they want to go to medical school, and this is a really good fit for them to get actual clinical research experience, which isn't always available in more bench science type of labs. You're not always talking to people. So it's a really good fit for a lot of pre-med students or students who are interested in nursing or social work. Certainly, a lot of our students are psychology and neuroscience majors and want an applied clinical research experience that involves both the clinical and the research parts of that. But our post-bac lab coordinators, for example, they come from a variety of different backgrounds. These are people who worked full-time after getting a bachelor's degree in our lab. One of them was an engineering major who decided she wanted to pursue clinical psych instead, and I was thrilled to hire her. One of them was a chemistry and business double major here at Stony Brook, and he's applying to med school this upcoming cycle, but really loves our lab's work, and we love having him here. And he actually worked in the lab for 2 years before I hired him. He's fantastic, and I think a really great example of how Stony Brook students tend to get really involved in our work over time. So people don't necessarily have to be psych majors to get involved. We care a lot more about why you're interested in working with us and what you're hoping to gain out of the training experience than what your major is.
Okay, great. Thank you. So one of the next questions is, how does your lab keep up to date with emerging findings in neuroscience?
Yeah, great question. So neuroscience is a fascinating field. We admittedly really don't integrate it much. A lot of the research in neuroscience, and this is coming from somebody who spearheaded a ton of that research at the National Institute of Health, Dr. Tom Insel, who started a lot of work there. A lot of it hasn't been well translated into clinical practice. Because of the nature of our interventions, which are psychosocial, as in we don't do any medication-based treatment, we're really not focused at the level of the brain. Because of the design of our studies, we're recruiting from across the whole country. We're not going to have people come in for a brain scan to see how and whether they respond to our treatments. My general policy is that if the assessment is more expensive than the intervention, then that's probably not going to be worth it for us to include. And for us, measuring brain activity would 100% be more expensive than delivering our treatments. So there are amazing neuroscience labs on campus, but that's just not really a core part of our mission or what we're trying to work on.
Okay, perfect. Next question. Why does it seem to be that mental health issues are on the rise in the United States? What do you find to be the largest contributor to this mental health pandemic? Not
smartphones. It is not smartphones' fault. A lot of people try to blame smartphones. The data does not suggest that's real. That's my little soapbox. I'll get off that now. But the global pandemic certainly isn't helping. It's basically creating a perfect storm between social isolation, instability in so many families across the country, uncertainty about the future, and lack of peer interactions and relationships. That is it's basically every perfectly lined up ingredient for depression risk mixed into a bucket and poured on the entire country. That's how I feel about the global pandemic. So right now, we're facing a huge risk for an incoming mental health crisis in the United States because of all these risk factors combining all at the same time on so many different levels. Not to mention how challenging things have been in the country socially and culturally and politically over the past couple of years. There are so many different reasons why things are really hard emotionally for people right now. For that reason, our lab, a lot of labs kind of had to slow down on research during the pandemic because it was harder to do. Our lab experienced the exact opposite of that, and we have been incredibly busy. We have been trying to scale up our mental health supports to youth across the country and in other countries. We've had partnerships nationally and internationally to make that happen and to ensure that our interventions remain free to everybody who wants to use them. So long story short, there is no easy answer or simple answer to your question. By design, mental health problems are multifactorial and wellness is multifactorial, and there's never going to be an easy answer. But we hope that our interventions can provide one piece of a very large and complex solution to preventing that crisis from being as bad as it could be.
Awesome. That's a beautiful answer. I would definitely have thought smartphones to a certain extent would be a large contributor. So that's interesting to hear.
Researchers have studied that so much because everyone assumes it's real, but it depends on how you use social media and smartphones, not the existence of smartphones.
Right. Relative to the interaction with it, I guess.
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay, next question. How have your many clinical trials evolved and taken shape over the last few years since this lab has been operational?
Yeah. Well, we've totally reorganized our process for recruitment and expanded our scope of thinking and reach. When we arrived, and even when I was in graduate school, digital mental health was kind of an emerging idea, but not really regularly practiced. In graduate school, I did most of my research in a lab, in a physical lab, and families came to visit the lab for me to treat them. And for me to involve them in research studies. In the past year, especially since the pandemic has started, and so many public health mitigation efforts have led everyone to be isolated and socially distanced, we've rethought our entire approach to research to make it possible for us to include families no matter where they live in our studies. And that's been wonderful. So we have participants in our most recent trial of 2,452 teenagers from Alaska, from North Dakota, from Texas, certainly from New York, from all 50 states, contributing to this work and being involved in our research and reporting benefits for depression symptoms. And that, more than anything, has led us to believe that we can't go back to the old way of doing things. We can't think small anymore in terms of how to solve public health crises like depression and anxiety. And so just that transition towards larger scale thinking and research has been really important for us. And we're excited to continue pursuing research of that way moving forward.
That's awesome. Do you know how people from those other territories found out about, your offerings?
Instagram.
Naturally.
So we share information about our studies on Instagram and Facebook, and that's how people find out about us.
Yeah. Not too surprising, but that's awesome that you've had such a reach with that.
We're thinking about advertising on TikTok, but we don't think that'll be as effective. It's more just, it seems like a fun thing to try to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. Maybe you can, I don't know if maybe we could share that towards the end of this so people have links to that and just can see.
Yeah, I put our Instagram handle at the beginning, and you're welcome to peruse. We have some posts this month for Suicide Awareness Month. And yeah, so feel free to follow us or connect via that.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. So next question. Are the undergraduate research positions considered more of a compensated internship or volunteer position?
Oh, thank you for asking that. So students get course credit. Every semester they work with us. They can get 3 credits for working in the lab. Over the summers, there are some paid opportunities. But during the year, we encourage folks to do course credit. And there are different levels of course credit, such that in the beginning, you can do Sci 273 is the course number for it, but that's a three credit undergrad research course that pretty much every new research assistant is enrolled in for 2 or 3 semesters, depending on how long they stay with us. And then there are more advanced, higher level course numbers for independent studies in psychology or an honors thesis. And if you stay in lab for more than a year, I'll tend to work with you more individually on crafting a personalized syllabus or reading list or discussion kind of series to support your learning.
Great, thank you. And then it looks like this is the last question. So I just want to put this out to all the participants. If you guys do have additional questions, definitely get them in because we have about 10 minutes left. But this next question is, ideally, where would you like to see this project or your projects along with its clinical studies and trials going in the next few years?
Well, we have grants that tell us where we should bring it in the next few years. So I can talk about that a little bit. So right now, some directions that we're really excited about in our lab are doing a little bit more of what's called mixed methods research, which is taking multiple different sources of data, both quantitative data and qualitative data, to improve our interventions and tailor them for specific populations who have been historically underserved by the mental health care system. So we recently got one grant as an example to adapt and tailor a lot of our mental health interventions for youth in the LGBTQ community, because those youth report relatively high rates of things like depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking. It's been documented for years that that's the case, but supports generally aren't tailored for specific groups or specific individuals or populations. So we're going to be actually working with an advisory panel of teenagers that we're going to be paying for like an internship opportunity to help us tailor and build our interventions for that group, and then again disseminate nationally to see how well the programs work that are created in partnership with youth. So that's one direction I'm really excited about. Others include figuring out where these interventions can sort of live. So are they best when they're given directly to teenagers on the internet or on apps? Are they best when they're embedded within school systems or pediatric clinics? Sort of where is the best way and what is the most efficient means of getting these out to folks who need them exactly at the point in time when they need them? That's really what we're excited to work on in the coming years.
Awesome, great. We have a few more questions coming in. What do you look for in an RA applicants to your lab? Typically?
Yeah, so we have pretty general basic requirements. Like we want folks to have a 3.5 GPA. We want them to at least express interest in our lab specifically. So we ask on our application form, like, why this lab instead of another lab in the psychology department or another lab in another department? What interests you about this research in particular? You know, those answers really matter to us. We want to know that you did your homework and looked at our website and that you're familiar with what we do and that you have a reason for wanting to be involved. The most important thing to us is that you really are interested in it and that you care, because ultimately we are a community of people who are doing this work because we feel like it's important and we enjoy doing it and we're motivated to do it. So we take on research assistants who kind of share in our mission of trying to reduce mental health on a broad scale. And we're really grateful to have lots of RAs with the same, you know, commitment and excitement for the work that we all have. Let's see, the 2-semester commitment is pretty key. So because of how intensive the training process is, we do want to keep folks on for a full academic year at minimum. Usually people stay longer than that, but that's one of the other requirements. And then our lab coordinators conduct individual interviews with all of our applicants. Just to get a sense of, you know, how they work in a team, what kind of supervision style fits best for them, and things like that. But we don't have specific requirements, and people really do come from all over campus to join us.
Awesome. And looks like this is one of our last questions. Do you currently have any internship or volunteer opportunities for teenagers, so high schoolers, available?
No, and I say that sadly, because we tried that and there were just too many. there were a lot of requests, and we are really thoughtful in keeping our team big enough to do the work we need to do, but not so big that we can't actually provide a good training experience to everybody who's in our lab. And that's what ended up happening. Was we loved to see all these, teenagers interested in helping other teenagers. That's what we're all about, right? But we couldn't give enough time and supervision and support to everybody to actually make it worth their time. So ultimately, it's out of respect for the time of you and other teens like you and high schoolers, we just can't commit to it, but I appreciate the interest. I really do.
Great. And there was a follow-up question to this, and I was going to ask you myself, actually. So in the future, pending you see this expanding to some degree, do you think you'd ever be able to offer anything like that to teenagers again?
That'd be great. I'd love to. I really do hope that becomes a sustainable thing for us to do. Ultimately, we've existed for 2.5 years. So we're still early days, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to make it work longer term, but we're just not quite there yet.
Fair enough. Makes sense. All right. So I think that's all the questions that we have. I did share your Facebook, your Twitter, and your Instagram on this link. So hopefully people will click away and get some new followers. Is there anything else that I always like to ask this at the end of these sessions, is there any advice that you would like to offer to our attendees today, wherever they are standing, whether they're looking to commit to Stony Brook or just considering the field, anything that you want to kind of leave them with?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're all doing absolutely the right thing by exploring opportunities, by being in this meeting and, learning all you can about possible paths in college. I think opportunities to work in environments that feel like they're in line with your values is one of the most important things you'll find in college. That's what made college great for me, was finding a research lab that really spoke to me and really inspired my interests. And there's no shortage of that at Stony Brook. Certainly not limited to our lab. There are tons like it. But I think those are the things to really look for, is do you feel like you could live out your values at the university that you choose? And I think that's the biggest piece of advice I'd probably relay.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Schleider, for presenting tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all the attendees that came today. Thank you to Kelly and Valerie, who are behind the scenes helping me with the chat functionalities. We will have this on our YouTube page. I also did link out to that, so that should be up within the next few days. So if you guys want to rewatch this to take any notes or anything you missed. And again, I linked all the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram links to Dr. Schleider's work, so you guys can always check that out as well after the presentation. But again, thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.